I'm really excited to welcome tonight Kiley Reid, celebrating her new book, Come and Get It. Kiley Reid is the author of Come and Get It and Such a Fun Age, which was a New York Times bestseller and longlisted for the 2020 Booker Prize. Her writing has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Playboy, The Guardian, and others, and Reid is currently an assistant professor at the University of Michigan. In conversation with Reid tonight will be our very own marketing director here at Politics and Prose, Glory Edim. Glory is the author of 2 books, Well-Read Black Girl and On Girlhood. So please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose tonight, Kiley Reid and Glory Edim.
Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to start by reading. I'm just going to dive in. This is in chapter 2. You guys can hear me, right? Yeah? Okay, great. Millie pulled out a chair. She began cutting out little cards that would go on the desk of each resident. Green slips of paper with the RA on duty phone number, a crisis hotline, the dorm address, and so on. Colette got to work on the residents' door decks. Millie wished she'd observed Colette's handwriting before she'd given up this task. But when she looked up, she was promptly relieved. Colette had written the name Morgan on a pink inner tube, and her handwriting really was quite nice. It was as if she were good at doing an accent. The letters' curves were feminine and round. Millie crossed her ankles. So where were you last year? Southgate. It was such ass. We hated it. You and Ryland? Yeah, I'm hoping this will be a lot more chill. It will be. Students here already have friends, or they're on that housing scholarship, or they're in a sorority, which sounds annoying, but it's not because they're always out. Colette placed sunglasses, reading Kira to the side, holding the edges so the ink wouldn't smudge. I don't mind that. I'll be good as long as there's no freshmen, and if I don't have to communicate with Joni. Millie laughed through her nose. Was Joni in Southgate with you? No, thank God, Colette said. But we both worked at Clubhouse Fitness last summer, and she was annoying for obvious reasons. But then, so when the minimum wage changed from $8 to $8.50, I made this presentation on how I should be getting $9.50 because I was killing it over there. I got like 4 old people to start taking Pilates. Probably added years to their lives, and they love me, but whatever. Anyway, the management ate it up, and they were like, ooh, PowerPoint, look at this initiative. And they gave me $9.16 an hour, which was dumb, but I was like, fine. But then Joni was like, how is that fair? I've worked here longer than you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, you've worked here like 4 months longer, but if you want a raise, then go ask, loser. And she was like, that's not the point. That's disrespectful. At this, Colette looked up. With a Sharpie in her hand, she did that quick, listless motion for someone jerking off. And she was just a huge dick to me all summer. She'd be like, hey, Colette, the spa water needs ice. Like, ooh, cool. Thanks for telling me. Millie smiled. That's really dumb, she said. I know, she's such a pill. She also got pissed because this one time, I don't even remember what I said, but I had always assumed she was gay because, like, fucking duh. And I said something about it, and she was like, what? Why would you say that? And I was like, whoa, my bad, but I'm gay, so chill out. But yeah, when I saw her name on the dorm list, I was like, wow, I'm going to jail this year. But then I asked Amy who I was paired with, and then I was like, okay, fine, she seems normal. At this, Millie experienced what she knew was a surplus of flattery, and what felt like an adolescent intrigue at learning that Colette was gay. In order to not draw attention to Colette's gayness, something she hadn't considered one way or the other, Millie picked up another sheet of cards. I'll stop there.
Okay, so with that, I want to jump right in because I love how you do dialogue. I love how you structure your sentences, and you have encapsulated what it means to be a college student. I read in an article where you call this your dorm novel.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us why you decided to set this on University of Arkansas's campus and have it be college students. What was that about?
Sure. So I lived in Fayetteville for exactly 1 year, from 2016 August to 2017. My husband had a job opportunity, and I had just been rejected from 9 graduate schools. And he was like, do you want to come try again? And I said, sure. And so I worked at a coffee shop, and I wrote articles for a magazine there, and just lived in Fayetteville. So I love the town, and I love a college town. And I think that there's something really interesting about Fayetteville in that it's in the South, but a lot of people who I later interviewed about a lot of things for the novel would say to me, oh, Fayetteville, that's not the South. The South is like Clemson. The South is Auburn. Fayetteville's not the South. That's like Denver. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic, to be geographically Southern, but not philosophically in everyone's eyes. I think a big state school that runs the town is really interesting as well. But you're right. I am difficult, and I call it a dorm novel. I love a campus novel. I love prep. I love secret history. Yep. I don't know if you consider The Sellout a campus novel, but maybe.
Kind of, yes.
Yes. Yes. But I do think that this is a novel that is not concerned with academia at all. This is not at an Ivy League. This is not students in classrooms. There's like half a page that happens in a classroom. Mm-hmm. This is what happens when you are alone, freaking out about who you are inside of your room. Yeah, all of those things are coming into play.
Well, throughout the whole novel, I just felt all the anxiety of trying to learn how to adult and be present. And there's all these things that the characters are contending with. There's race, there's sexuality. There's just this pressure of performance. How did you decide how to bring all these things together and make it, because they seem to collaborate and come together so seamlessly, but I mean, clearly that's not the case. Who was the first person that you created? Was it Millie? Was it Agatha? How did it come to be?
Millie and Agatha were kind of born from each other. And so Millie is an RA. She's our protagonist. She's 24. And Agatha is a visiting assistant professor. Yeah. And I read a book called Paying for the Party, How College Maintains Inequality. It's written by two sociologists, Laura Hamilton and Elizabeth Armstrong, one of whom goes to U of M, and I haven't met her yet, so I need to do that. But they wrote this 5-year interview study where they interviewed young women in a Midwestern dorm about their socioeconomic background, their finances, their insecurities, and they followed their pathways and their opportunities and career choices. And I was really moved by the book. The information, one, of like who college like works for was really interesting for me. But also I just really loved the premise of really academic women interviewing young college women. There's a quote in the book where one of the girls says, "You guys haven't been to my room. Why hasn't anyone come talk to me yet?" And I thought that was so tender and intimate, and I wanted to have a strange relationship where an academic woman was found in a dorm. So they were kind of born from each other. Yeah. But then that book really inspired Agatha, but the one that really inspired Millie was this book called Knocking the Hustle Against the Neoliberal Turn in Black Politics, written by Lester Spence. Mm-hmm. This is one of those books it's really hard to say what it's about because it covers the civil rights era, inevitability politics, hustle culture. Mm-hmm. But that's where Millie was born out of. Millie is a hustler, and she believes working hard will always benefit her more than not working hard. And some things happen to shake up that belief for her.
Yeah, that theory.
Yes.
Well, it made me also think of Such a Fun Age, which we read that in our book club, and I absolutely loved it. You always look at power dynamics and the relationships between a younger woman and an older woman, a Black woman and an older white woman. Like you have like these power dynamics that are happening. Well, I wanted you to address, like, would the situations would they be the same if the visiting professor had been male? Because I kept thinking about that. I'm like, was Agatha was a man, would like this still be like happening?
Right.
And then what draws you to like explore these kind of power dynamics?
Okay, I'm going to answer the first one. Okay, listen. I have a lot of patience for certain tropes. The one that's like it was a bet to fall in love with someone and then they fall in love, I'll watch it every time. Like, that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. But the one of like the older male teacher and the younger, I'm a little tired. I'm not saying it can't be done well, but I'm a little tired right now. So I don't know if that would have been as interesting here. I think Millie is in a place where she sees someone sophisticated like Agatha and she's like, oh, I want to be you. Yeah. I want to like emulate you, like everything you do, like your clothes, like everything you're doing. I want to buy those things. And so I think it's a little bit more intricate than just like a teacher-student relationship that we see so often. And then you had such a good second question. Now just
the power dynamics in general, because I see the parallels from your first book to this book. It's just like, how do you contend with trying to find your footing? And like, as you said, Millie's trying to become Agatha, but also there's things in place that kind of resist that from happening just because of the, of her background and where she is.
Yes. Those things are part of the reason why I write, I feel the class dynamics between the two women will always separate them, I think. Millie is a really hard worker, but if she works her butt off and does everything right where she is, she's still never going to like own an apartment in Chicago like Agatha is. Right. So I think that's something that helps me define the power dynamics is looking at the entire structure of the world that these characters are living in. Mm-hmm. Millie is an RA. I was an RA for a year. I'm sure there's RAs in here. It looks like responsible people in here. Yes. Okay. So that's a position for students who want housing and payment, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm really interested in jobs where you're on all the time. Mm-hmm. And when you're an RA, anyone can come up to you and be like, I'm sad. My roommate's fighting with me, and you have to like contend with that. Mm-hmm. The fact that some students have to be an RA and some don't, I think that's the real issue here that's at play. So then whatever happens between my characters, it's not immaterial, but it's like, well, no one should be in this position to begin with in the first place. Right. So then I can kind of let my characters behave a little badly within the circumstance. Yeah.
How did you decide to, write the particular voices? I really enjoyed Kennedy's voice, and she just always felt like anxiety driven and had all these like neuroses, and it felt real. And earlier you were mentioning the research. Were you like really pulling from interviews? Were you trying to really imitate the way people talk? Like even in the passage you read, it feels like you're listening to like a young person just have a conversation versus reading a novel, you know?
A little bit of both. So it kind of worked out really neatly. Those were the two books for my two other main characters. And Kennedy was not going to be that big of a main character. Yeah. And then I read a book called, this is the last book I'll cite, that's why I read Monoculture, How One Story is Changing Everything by F.S. Michaels. And it's a book that's all about capitalism, but she refers to it as the economic story. And she talks about how it infiltrates certain parts of our lives, from our education, family life, our creativity. And there's this one section where she's talking about like living in a class society. We look at each other and we say, you are a rational human being, and the decisions that you made the best ones for you, and the shirt you wore and the things you're eating, those are all the things that you know is best for you. But it's actually not so much like that. And it's more, she compares it to a really good Chinese food restaurant where there's literally like 400 things on the menu, and you only ordered 3 or so, but you're like, oh, this is the best one. But you don't really know if that's the thing that you like the most. And that really inspired me with Kennedy and her voice and her being kind of crippled by choice. Mm-hmm. I wanted to take the economic story and put it in the dorm, and the currency became friends. Mm-hmm. Like, how do I get friends and how do I meet people? Kennedy, when I started writing about the weird, gross stuff she does in her room by herself, that's when I was like, I think I want to spend more time.
Oh, yeah, you guys will.
Yeah. She is a transfer student. She's coming from the University of Iowa. She's had something traumatic happen to her, and she wants to start over completely. Within this, there's 3 main characters. Millie wants to save everything she makes. Agatha wants to splurge a little bit. And Kennedy thinks that she does not have a relationship with money, but she's deeply connected to consumption and buying stuff. And if she gets a little panicky, she finds herself wanting to go purchase things. That's where Kennedy's voice was coming from. Yeah.
And you feel it. Like it feels very intense. So you brought up money. Why do you enjoy writing about money in this way? Are you trying to, all the books that you cited are more academic, if you for lack of a better word, like, are you trying to make a statement about capitalism?
That is a great question. And no. That's really just not my bag. Like, I tell stories, but I'm super inspired by the world that we live in. I don't read a lot of science fiction, but I love watching science fiction movies, and I like the limitations that a world has. Like, when's the comet coming? What do we have to eat? I like to work with those like on a domestic level. The novels that I like to read do not leave you with one thesis or message. They just kind of haunt you throughout your day. Or I think like a weird portal forms when a novel nails a gesture or a moment of embarrassment, and you feel it and go, oh, I've done that. I know that person. Mm-hmm. That's kind of more of the goal of my work. That and what you were saying about people talking, when I can hear someone talking in a book, that's a huge goal for me. Yeah. So that's more important to me than to get into my beliefs on capitalism. Yeah.
Can you talk more about your research process and the interviews and how you selected the people to interview?
Yeah, I started after I read Paying for the Party. I wanted to interview people, and I do not have any journalistic background or anything, but I just asked some of my old students if they would talk to me about money. I paid them $15 for 45 minutes of their time. I asked a few students who I could tell enjoyed my class, and then one of them said, oh, my roommates and I are always talking about this. And I was like, oh, would they talk to me? And they all talked to me. I went in their apartment, and they had this big sign on the wall that said, let's get weird. I was like, okay, here we go. I really wanted to interview students from a bunch of different socioeconomic backgrounds, and there were a lot of kind of similar incomes in my classes, so I had to search a little bit. So I had friends whose students were open to it. I interviewed a young woman who worked part-time at a grocery store while she was still in school. The young woman at the Hy-Vee Starbucks that I went to every day and who I would talk to, we ended up talking, and I put something she said right into the book. So
What'd you put?
So there's Kennedy comes from a really big family, and they at Christmas go to a dollar store, and while one kid sits in the car, the other ones go in the store and shop for the kid for Christmas, and then they all switch. And that came from my Starbucks worker. I said, that is beautiful. She was like, oh, it's just silly. And I was like, no, it's going in the book. So, and they were all very excited at the idea of their lives being aligned in the book. So that made me excited too. But after the students, I kind of brought it out a little bit. I interviewed baton twirlers, optometrists, Missouri natives, Arkansas natives as well. Just, about 30 to 40 interviews. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Was there anything that, from those interviews, I know you mentioned you put that in the book, but was there anything that really surprised you, or you took away that was that you weren't expecting?
Yeah. I think more than anything that people always ask me, how do you get people to talk to you about money? People love talking about money. They love telling me that they shouldn't, but then they love talking about it. I learned that there's a surgery, a major hip surgery that a lot of baton twirlers get because of one move that they're all doing. I had no idea. There were moments that did really shock me. There was a young woman who was in a sorority, and I was asking her about recruitment process, and I was asking her about the two Black fraternities and sororities on campus. And I said, okay, are the Black sororities involved with this recruitment process in the same way? And she said, oh no, it's just the normal ones. And she caught herself. And just the way that she kind of tried to cover, you know what I mean? And in that moment, I need to be a good journalist and just let her do what she's doing. Yeah. But there's so much
in that
heavy lifting going on there. And so those things would definitely surprise me. There was another moment that's in the first chapter where I was asking a young woman how her parents give her money. I was really interested in just the logistics. Is it Venmo? Is it check? Is it cash? I wanted to know those things. And she said, I get a practice paycheck from my dad's dental office, but obviously I don't do anything. And I was like, wait. I said, tell me about it. She was like, yeah, it's a practice paycheck, and it's out of the dental office. I was like, I'm so sorry. I feel like that's fraud though. Right? That's fraud. And she was like, I don't know. It's a practice paycheck. And that went right into the novel. Yeah.
I'm having a moment. It's a practice paycheck. That's hilarious.
That one was real. Yeah.
Okay, back to the book. So can you tell, I also really love the title. In my mind, I'm like, come and get it, I had this kind of Wheel of Fortune type thing in my mind, when I immediately saw the title. Can you explain, elaborate why you chose the title?
Sure. Yeah. I don't have a title whenever I start out. Same with Such a Fun Age. I did not have a title till the end. And then maybe in the last 2 years, I wanted the title to be Suey, as in Woo Pig Suey, the Arkansas chant. Yeah. So I was calling it Suey. Everyone hated it. Everyone, my editor, agent was like, let's keep going back to the drawing board. And I was like, nope, it's Suey. There was something so violent and simple about Suey. But then when we started saying the word to people, they would say shooey, zooey, and no one could get it. And I was like, okay, maybe we do need to go back. So then one day my agent and I were texting, and I said, I still love Suey. And she said, okay, but what does Suey mean? It's this aggressive, here pig, come and get it, right? And I was like, a first chapter that teaches a reader how to read your novel. And in here, I was wanting the first novel to say, hey, you're listening here, you're eavesdropping in this book. And that's what everyone here is doing as well. And this is a book about gossip and money here. And so I also like a first chapter that kind of shows most of the characters and the layout. So that was super important to me. And I did that with Such a Fun Age as well.
Yeah.
And then I kind of pull back and dip into people's quieter lives. This one was different, obviously, because I have 3 characters. But this was also work. I feel like Such a Fun Age had these kind of big traditional set pieces of these like Thanksgiving and grocery store and news thing. This one, maybe it's because I was pregnant. This one worked like contractions, almost like ramping up. And things having like a low level dread from page 1. So I do plot things out a bit and write what's going where and who's doing what. I think where to deploy information about characters really changes a read. So I definitely write things out. But if things are going too according to plan, that's usually wrong. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting that you said this like feeling of eavesdropping, because it does have that kind of allure where you're like, you're in the scene, but you're kind of covering over it.
Yeah.
Especially the scenes with Agatha too. Like, I feel like there's a lot of times where she's making assumptions about the subjects, and you get really do a great job of getting her into your dialogue. And in my mind, I felt like her character was being a little bit she was exploiting them. Was that your intention, or does that, but maybe like I'm reading from my own bias, right?
Of course. So, I mean, doing publication stuff and talking to journalists, they're like, what is she doing? Right. Because Agatha does make some journalistic like integrity mistakes here.
Yeah.
I love issues in novels that are like not misdemeanors, but you're like, oh, that's wrong though, right? Like,
yeah, it's like a fine line of like, is this a moral injury? Yes. Are we crossing over a line that is like very, very thin?
Yes, that's where I like to live. I feel like she's in that area. Agatha is listening to young people and using their words incorrectly in articles that she's writing. However, Millie, this young RA, has made some new, very cool friends. And sometimes they say things and she repeats them as her own words later. This is a book about taking other people's words and the ethics around that a little bit.
Yeah. And so that brings me to another question about like, because that is actually happening in real time with social media and all these, and AI. We're having so many conversations about like who owns the words, or like, do you know what I mean? So like, how does that come into play with this book? Like, what is the ownership of language?
I mean,
I know I'm getting all theoretical right here, but
it's a great question though, especially as we see all the time, like authors getting in trouble for like taking other people's stories.
Oh yeah, like, even whether it's like a caption or repost things. I'm thinking primarily about social media, but it's also it's such a huge conversation with AI because everyone's like, you know, it's pulling onto this, I don't even know how to explain ChatGPT, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's happening.
Yeah.
And so, but it's also happening in conversations. Like you overhear something and then it's a game of telephone, right?
Exactly. This is, I'm so in the middle of this though, because as like when you're starting out writing, I actually think it's a great practice to try and emulate the style of people that you like. I think that's a great thing that you can do because you're going to bring all of yourself with it. And so copying in that way, I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah. I'm not okay with people exploiting other people's stories at all. Like everyone that I interviewed, their identities are completely hidden and they were excited about being in the book. It wasn't like I'm taking their lives. I think that there's something wrong with that. I don't think that for the sake of art, you should just exploit people at all. But yeah, Agatha, she's lonely. She's just had a breakup. And her journalistic integrity definitely gets questioned here. And I think that she feels protected by Arkansas. I'm super interested when people go to a different place and they're like, this place doesn't count. Like back home counts, but like this is like fine. Yeah, that's where she's
basically at. Everyone who moves to New York.
Yes, exactly. Wait, I really want to know, were you an RA?
No, I wasn't. But I was like at Howard, like I was an ambassador. Like so like a campus pal. So when freshmen would come, I would like welcome them.
This makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I am a very enthusiastic individual. Yeah, I did do that.
Nice.
And also there's another quote. I'm going to read it out to you. The thing about a campus novel is that you're watching drama play out in a strange utopia. And I love the description of college being like a strange utopia. I always have a theory that we're always like playing out like different versions of high school, like you are like lives, you know, you're like in high school, then you're in college, and you're in corporate setting, like you're just constantly playing out different versions, you know? And so like this idea of strange utopia, what is it about our college years that feels so nostalgic and like almost just like it doesn't count almost like anything you do on a campus doesn't feel like real life, even though it is.
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Okay. College is a utopia for a few reasons. Mm-hmm. I'm currently, my biggest interest is urban infrastructure, and I'm in a very weird corner of YouTube right now that I cannot pull my way out of. However, I think that because college is like an island and a walkable community that you can get around and go grocery shopping and go see your friend and then go play lacrosse, like it feels like a fake paradise. When you're in college, it's like the only time in your life maybe that you can have free time and shared like expensive like gyms and libraries that someone's grandma like gave money to or whatever. And like everyone is living in the same little area and you like have this weird community. And I think that that's why college feels so special. Mm-hmm. I do think on the other end that college like masks our financial status a bit because we're all using all of those things all of the time. Of course, soon you realize like your roommate like has a lot of money or whatever it is. But I do think that college is this very special way of living that seems very separate from the way that we live most of the rest of our lives.
Yeah, it does feel like a safe bubble.
Yeah.
Like at one point I was like applying to PhD programs. I'm like, do I just want to be back in college? Like
professional student,
and just be like safe, you know, but like
it does feel safe though. It's strange.
It's like a weird bubble. But I'm really excited at the way you explored it and the fact that you focus on women, because that is, I feel like when we talk about money and the power and influence and the impact of it, the idea of womanhood, it just gets like disconnected, you know, like, and I don't know, what are your theories on why that happens in real life and in this novel?
I think one of the reasons I'm drawn to writing about women mostly, I think I surround myself mostly with women, maybe that's why, but with this novel, I was really interested in consumption and buying things. And I feel like women are pushed to buy more things in their lives, from pressures to get married, wear makeup, when you have a baby, like all of those things. I feel like there's more things that women are like, oh, should I buy that? A little bit often. So I do think that this is a novel where I explore women trying to buy things from each other, whether it's words or youth or beauty or other things. And so I think that's why I was drawn to writing about so many women here. Yeah.
I love that. We are going to take questions in a second. So if you have questions, keep them percolating. We'll have the mic up there. The other thing I really wanted to explore is how, let me put my like a list, actually.
You got a good list.
Yeah, I know I got to get the list. If there was anything that was like left on the cutting room floor, like you had mentioned, like the RA scene that like you wrote for 80 pages. And because there's a scene after Kennedy. Okay, Kennedy was one of my favorite characters.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And Taylor too. Yes. Yeah, so there was a scene after they're having an interaction, and I'm having, in my mind, I'm like, okay, are they friends? Because even though they're in this community, they're all connected, I didn't feel like there was actual friendship. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like they're all close and they're in the same proximity. They're doing all these things together, but they don't seem like genuine friends. And yes.
Okay, this is funny because it kind of goes along with your first question. There's always lines that come out to you when you're starting to think about a novel, and some of them stick and some of them go away. And the one line that came, but then I had to cut, was about Millie wondering, were they really friends or did they just live in the same dorm?
Yeah.
And I think we've all had that experience of like, oh, this is like heartbreaking. You know, when you have a really good friend at work and you feel like close, and let's say one of you moves jobs or whatever, and you get together again and you realize that without that tie, there's kind of nothing there between you. I think college is really ripe for that, and so is a dorm as well. So yeah, that's one thing that was left in the cutting room floor. And yeah, friendships here, they're not super secure. But I also feel like in a dorm, you're figuring out who you are, and making friends is so difficult
but then also on the other side of that, like, you know, it made me also think about just like the culture of like sororities and things like that, where you can also make like lifelong friends too. So, but why was the choice to make Millie almost this, to make her connection so fraught? Like they felt really fragile.
Millie is a person who is always working, and her jobs are where she sleeps. Her like whole life is like work. But she was like an innkeeper when she's an RA. And I think that she's looking for really intimate relationships, but it's always within the confines of work.
Yeah.
And I think that because she's such a hard worker and like when other people don't have the same values, I think it's difficult for her a little bit. Yeah.
And that brings me to another question, just like value systems. So with Millie, you've described her, and it's very clear in the book that she is like hardworking. She's committed. She wants to move. Like she's looking for a forward trajectory so she can be in a different status in life and have more power, more influence. So how, compared to some of the other girls where their values seem to be more conservative or more have like more of a foundation, is Millie, what is she supposed to represent in terms of upward mobility? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Millie, for me, always represented hustle. And Millie almost forgets sometimes that, yes, working hard is great. I think people should work hard. I work hard. That is great. But I think that Millie, within her hustle, forgets that people are not starting off from the same place with their hustle. And sometimes just getting out of bed in the morning is a hustle for a lot of people. Her, as a worker, I wanted to mess with those values that she has around work and how you get what you want. Some names of characters come to me really quickly. Millie was not really quickly. I had all the other names. And then I was flirting with Millie and I looked it up and it meant worker. And I was like, okay, that's it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did, this is so random, but you did ask about deleted scenes. And I just remembered another one, which maybe is good. Maybe is not. There's a character named Ryland. Ryland is very low income. He's from Louisiana. He's fun. He loves abusing prescription drugs. And there's this one chapter where he's going on and on about, he's very much on Adderall, and he talks about Chick-fil-A for like half the chapter. And my editor was like, do we need a whole Chick-fil-A chapter? And I was like, yes, we do. And at the end of that chapter, he was talking about something that I learned about in an interview. This is wild, called covenant eyes. Has anyone ever heard of this? Yes. Okay, great. Ryland was on something called covenant eyes. I had this whole section. Ryland is gay, and his family doesn't know because they're religious. And his brother was like, hey man, like, what's going on? Can I pray with you? Like, what's going on? And he's like, I didn't want to tell him I was gay. So I was just like, I'm addicted to porn. I don't know. And his brother's like, oh, okay, we're going to work through this together. Like, I got you. And they download this software that exists called Covenant Eyes, where you have an accountability partner. And if you look up naughty things on your computer, the other person gets a report of everything you are looking up. So Millie's like asking him like, but you're gay, like you don't even like porn, like, and he's like, I know, but I just like will Google like wet boobs once in a while, so it like comes up. And then my brother is like, hey man, I saw you slipped up, like can we pray together, like you're gonna beat this, like. So I had this whole scene written out. My editor was like, no. Covenant Eyes will make it into something that I write, I promise. So yeah, thank you for letting me share that with you.
I love that. All the pieces of random research and things that you come across that could like be on the cutting room floor, or it could be in your book, Covenant Eyes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that so much. Oh gosh. Okay, let me like get back to my list.
I know. I threw us. I'm sorry. Covenant Eyes just came back to me, and I had to share it with somebody.
When it comes to the aspect of I want to get back to Agatha, because I also think that, you know, we addressed her thin line of possibly exploiting some of the information and not being as like forthright when it comes to certain things in the book. What was your goal with having her be that a certain age too? Because I also thought that kind of age. Yeah, because I was just like, again, this dynamic of like her being older, and I was thinking about as women get older, like their space or status, their beauty, everything seems to kind of quote unquote diminish as you get older, right? And so I kept thinking when I was trying to visualize her and see like, is this like a reach because she's getting older and feeling like less prominent, less important, and trying to kind of grasp that?
Yeah,
that was coming across, but I didn't know if I was misinterpreting.
No, I don't think you're misinterpreting. There's a chapter about Agatha's failed relationship that she's kind of coming out of, and she was with a woman who was 6 years younger than her, but not just any woman, like a super hot dancer woman who's like terrible with money and very youthful for better or for worse. So I think Agatha comes off of that relationship saying, one, like, you know what, I can do whatever I want. I can be fun. And she's kind of reaching for these youthful things. She's kind of not fun. She's not fun. Listen, I just want to make clear, I love all of my characters. And I love Agatha a lot. She's neurotic and like weird and so serious. And like, she's the kind of person who, like, when a joke is funny, she doesn't laugh. She'll be like, that is funny. You know what I mean? Like that kind of person. And I think that's great. Pictured. Yes, exactly. And so I think that her reaching for this youth and like, just because she's interested in it, she's at this place where she's like, I could be interested in that. And maybe that's my next book. Yeah, exactly. Yes. I think that's where the youth is coming in for her. But also she's 38. I think that, I mean, I'm 36. It's a strange age. And so she's trying to have like a resurgence of her career at the same time as well. And all these things are coming into play. Yeah.
And 38 isn't old. I don't want to make, like, it's not old, but compared to when you're talking to someone who is 19 and you're in a different season of your life, like there is a stark contrast there. Yes. And you can go down this like rabbit hole of comparisons of like, if I had made this choice, if I had done this relationship, things would be different. Yeah. You know, so that was like what I was like feeling as I was like reading her character.
I think that's correct. And I do think she dips in and out of acknowledging properly these young people are very young. Like that's a big difference. Yeah. I remember when I was working at a coffee shop in Fayetteville. This is 2017. Yeah. And then these young guys would come in saying they want cigarettes and I have to check IDs and I would take their ID and I would say, okay, what year are you born? And they'd be like 1998. And I'd be like, oh my God, you can, that's fine then. Like I have to give it to them because they're 18 or whatever it is. And I couldn't believe that that's like the range there. So I do think that's a big difference in those 20 years. I think, you ever have a relationship and you have a breakup and there's things that you know your partner wouldn't expect you to do and it gives you a little joy to do them afterwards? I think that that's where Agatha is floating. Yeah.
Right. Like, again, I can be fun.
Yeah.
Are there other parts of the book that you feel more people are gravitating to? Like, I think obviously we're talking about money, we're talking about capitalism, like the youth, you know, campus aspect of it. What else do you think people are going to take away from this story?
I think there's an enjoyment at acknowledging the insanity of living in a dorm and living within such close proximity to other people in a tiny little box and the things that you think you have to buy. One thing that I love talking to people about is a character named Peyton. So Millie is a Black RA on her floor, and there's one other Black student on her floor, and that's Peyton. And Millie sees her and just feels like, oh, I'm going to be like this girl's like big sister. Like, I'm going to help this girl. Like, she's a little socially awkward, but like, I got you. And Peyton's like, I want nothing to do with you. She wants nothing to do with her. And so I think that dynamic, a lot of people have talked to me about, and it was really fun for me to put them in the same room with one another. There's a lot of very specific items in this book, that I think shape the way you see a person. And certain people are like DMing me about certain items like the Patagonia jacket or the Nalgene bottle or like what that means to them. And I think when objects speak to you in that way, that's super interesting. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Peyton because that's also a thing too. It's just like when I went to a historically Black college, so that necessarily wasn't an issue. But when you're at a PWI, predominantly white institution, and then there's only like a limited number of Black people, the expectation is like, okay, you two should like each other. You two should be friends. And if that's not happening, like, what does that mean? Or like the assumptions that are being made because you happen to be like the only two Black girls in the class or like, in the dorm.
It's like, there's pressure either way. Right. If you're the person who doesn't want to like be friends, or if you do, there's a ton of pressure. I remember I was in a class in college and there was one other Black girl there besides me. And the TA for the class was my girlfriend. And she told me after class one day, I need to tell you something. I talked to our teacher and he was complaining that no one talked in class. And she said, that's not true. Kiley talks. And he was like, who's that? And she's like, she sits over there. And he goes, which Black girl? I can never tell them apart. When I tell you we looked nothing alike, when I tell you that,
I believe you.
I could not. And so it's like, we weren't like friends fighting anything, but it's like immediately we have this like connection that everyone sees that we don't. It's like so much pressure on our relationship. And like, I can't see her pass through the hall without thinking of that at that point. I think there's so much pressure on Black students in PWIs that way, and this was just one way I wanted to explore it.
Yeah, it's so when I initially picked up your book, I was really drawn to Millie's character, but she's just a Black girl, and I was like, making connections there. But I do feel like this is a story that, I don't want to say, it sounds dramatic to say transcends race, but like, I don't know if her race was at the forefront as I was reading it, and that feels very intentional on your part. I just kept thinking of them as students in a collective, and thinking about her like individual circumstances that brought her to this space. And I think that's it was brilliant how you did that, because sometimes it just wasn't as like, I wasn't thinking about her race necessarily.
I think that's the read that I wanted. Race was such a prominent part of Such a Fun Age because it had to be with the circumstance.
Yes. I think with this, it's more class.
I think this is more class here. I also feel that Millie, if my character is not thinking about race that often, it feels inappropriate for me to have that be the story that I'm telling a reader. And also just like Black authors are going to write about race a lot in some books and not the others. And but I also think because Millie wasn't thinking about it as much, it was more fun for me, not fun, but it was more effective when racism does happen to her.
It felt more
because she's like, oh wait, I thought we were all just hanging out, and then someone's doubting why she has the job that she has, or someone saying something about oh, that thing is ghetto, or however it happens in the book. And so this wasn't a book where I wanted to explore race as much. I really want to explore consumption and gossip. And but at the same time, when you have Black characters, and there are several, it's part of their lives, and race does come up as well. Yeah.
And it also made me think that perhaps if you had put the setting at an Ivy League, race would have been more of, or just, it might have had a different space.
I agree.
Because at this university is there's probably like 20,000 students. At Yale, there's probably like 5,000. You know what I mean? Just like the numbers of it, that would have been different.
Way different.
So it was interesting that. Can you talk more about the setting? And I know you mentioned you lived there for about 1.5 years, but did you do any research in going back there, like when you were doing this round of just trying to get yourself familiar? Oh, okay.
I knew I wanted it to be in 2017. And then I planned on doing trips when I would go back, because that helps me so much, just like being in that space. But then the pandemic happened. Yeah. And so I said, okay, it's definitely in 2017 now. And I went on Google search and took pictures just to make sure that I was getting everything correct for how it was in that period. It was a huge bummer, but it did inspire me to reach out to more people and interview them. And I'm happy with how those things inspired the book too.
Did you interview any professors too?
I interviewed a journalism professor. I interviewed, a few at the university. I interviewed baton twirling coaches as well. I would just email people and say, hey, do you want to talk to me? And most of them would say yes. I was very surprised. Yeah.
I love that. I just appreciate your research process and being so thorough and so thoughtful about getting the sound of the characters, making sure they sound authentic, and you could see their worlds around each person.
Amazing.
So it just allows for a very seamless, fun read.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And then afterwards, this literally is my group text book. Yes. All my group texts. I was like, did you get to this part? What do you think about this character? And we've been reminiscing about college a lot. Good. We've been talking about our experiences and the things that stood out for us, and comparing. Some folks went to Ivy League schools, some went to state, and just the differences and that experience and living together. Yeah.
That's a huge goal of mine with the book. When a book reminds me of something that I completely forgot about, or a person or a place that I have not thought about in years, that's a success to me. That, and when a character is so specific that it ignites something in you. Yeah. I had a now friend who wrote the part of the poetry and the epigraph of the book, Lucy Biederman. She said she read the book and she said, I knew a Peyton. And she hated me and everyone else. And her parents would surprise her at work by driving 4 hours to come and see her. And they would have lunch with her and then they would leave. And she was like, I haven't thought about that in years. And that to me is the best thing.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's also kind of creepy, but it's very loving, but smothering all at once.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of mom-parent things in here as well. If that's your bag.
Yeah. Which also leads to a whole other conversation about mothering, because then it makes we were just talking about mom stuff, and our kids are so small, but you're like, how do you raise them so they're like efficient, reliable adults? And so when they get to college, they're resourceful and not like some of the characters in this book.
I think about that a lot. We both have little babies, and like my child's 1.5, and I'm like, even now I'm like, how do I let her know if she's at a restaurant and people are cleaning up that it's time for her to go? Like, why am I thinking about that now? But I like want her to be like a polite person in the world, and college is where all of that is like put to test all the time.
Right. But it's like only so much you can really do as a parent, because like what they sort out is going to be on that campus, and they have to do that independently.
Yes.
But you're hoping like all the small things you do up until that point will just like shape and mold them.
Exactly. I'm so obnoxious. I'm like, mommy is cleaning up right now. It's like trying to show by example. But some of those things they got to learn for themselves. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take some questions from the audience. Don't be shy.
Oh my goodness. Perfect.
Go for it. You do bikes right there.
They can line up. Is that how it works? Yeah.
Hello, is this working? Yes. Hi, thank you so much for being here. You mentioned that you write a lot of characters who make good and bad choices. I was wondering if you could talk about whether you actively think about like, this character is too unlikable, or this character is acting too well and behaving too well. If you like really construct how they make these good and bad choices, or if you just kind of let them act the way that you think they would act and see where the chips fall.
That is a great question. I'm a bit clinical when it comes to characters, and I do think about that. I don't think a likable character makes for a good character. I don't think a book needs a bunch of likable characters. Like, we all love Succession and like they're all awful. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need a bunch of like great people to have a good book. With this novel in particular, I was concerned after having a friend read the book, an early draft, about Millie being, a perfect protagonist kind of character. And I think that that's an issue when someone's a little bit too perfect. It doesn't mean shoehorning like, oh, let's have her like steal a book or something like into it doesn't mean that at all. But it's just like, what parts of her personality do we want to bring out more or less in what moments? So I definitely think about having characters that are too like, well, I want to read people who are super real. And when an author is telling me like, isn't she so nice? I'm like, oh my God, like, leave me alone a little bit. I feel like it's a little like manipulative. So I do think about that a lot. Millie is one of my more likable characters. But I can also say that like if Millie and Amira were roommates, like they would hate each other, I think. So that was kind of nice too. But yes, I do think about that a lot.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hi.
I was struck when you said that you paid your interviewees $15 to talk with you for 45 minutes about money.
Yeah.
So like back when I was doing interviews as a grad student in 2009, I had a grant to pay people $20 to work with me for an hour and a half, which to me as a grad student making $15,000 a year was like huge. Fortune.
Yeah.
And I realize now these were 50-year-old men who owned their own law firms, and they were like $20. Oh, thanks. Did you notice a difference in how people reacted to the possibility of getting $15? And then did that relate to what they had to tell you about their experience with money?
It's a great question. I feel that a lot of students are used to receiving sums like that from babysitting or house sitting or whatever. A lot of them didn't blanch too much. I did want to make it $15 an hour. Honestly, I was excited that I could do that. I wasn't in the position to do that with my first book, and it was just like, will you talk to me, please? Like, friend of a friend kind of person, and I wanted to make it worth it. I also feel like, in general, like when you're paying people, they are inspired to do a good job, and that's why people should get paid well for what they're doing. It was a little bit dicey, because I had like a script at a certain point, like, I'll pay you this for talking to me for this long, blah, blah, blah. And then when I would talk to people of a certain age, they'd be like, Kiley, you don't have to give me $15. Like, I'm an adult. It's fine. So that was kind of a strange line. But some of the girls, I remember I gave $15 to the group of roommates with the Let's Get Weird sign. And when I handed them cash, one of them said, oh, I didn't realize you were getting paid. Let's go get froyo. And I put that into the novel immediately. I don't know if it still lives there, but it was in a first draft. It is there. Thank you, guys. Yes. I think it was more of a symbol. Sometimes, how do I say it? you know when people want to prove like how normal they are to you? I think sometimes I had students say to me like really telling me like, oh, I can like eat off of this for like 8 days. I'm like, that's weird. So I did notice comments like that, which were more fodder for me, honestly. Yeah, those were the biggest moments with money. That's a great question though. Thank you.
Oops. Hi. Yeah. I actually really enjoyed the book. I was actually a little nervous because the reviews like I read was like, it's a little iffy, but I read it and I still feel like I really like it. But however, I do agree with some of the reviewers saying like there was minimal plot in this book. Like I'm a very big character driven person, so like I don't really mind that, but like I can see why some people were saying that. I just wondering like what's your view on it, and is it like how you were when you were starting to write this book, this is how you were envisioned, as in like this is going to be a minimal plot and it's going to be revolved around the characters.
Got you. Okay. With this book, the wonderful and terrible thing about publishing is that it takes forever. Okay, so there was 18 months between selling Such a Fun Age and it coming out. And I was in graduate school and I didn't want to waste like the graduate school experience. I really wanted to write. So I started writing it 10 months before Such a Fun Age came out because I was so nervous about Such a Fun Age 2 and I just like wanted to not think about it. And like, what do they say? The best way to get over someone is getting under someone else. You know what I mean? So I was just like, let me get into this. I did not go into this book thinking I'm going to have minimal plot because I like plot a lot. And there's a lot of aspects here. I feel like it's a different level.
Yeah. It's they're more interior.
I feel like it's a different level, but there's also really classic plot points within this novel of Millie wanting friends, wanting a house, wanting a boyfriend. And then there's Kennedy, like, okay, she leaves the dishes one time. Okay, her roommate's getting a little bit more annoyed with her. There were definitely aspects that I wanted to pump up because I really like plot as well. I don't go into a book saying, I'm going to do this kind of story. I think that I don't know how I could write that way. You know what I mean?
Well, I also think because your first book, it was like, I don't know what debut, like it was mega successful. And this book is going to be on the same plane, you know, but like I think people automatically start comparing.
I think
like,
so too.
And the plot with Such a Fun Age is like, it's a different pace. There's different stakes. And it's like, this feels more about proximity and the interior and the closeness of the characters versus like, there's way more, not drama, but there's just a different energy in Such a Fun Age.
I think that's correct. I think that's really correct. And Kari from Lit Society, I don't know if you listen to them. Lit Society is a great podcast. She was reading both books and she said to me, okay, let me tell you something. Such a Fun Age is so fun and it's a sitcom. Come and Get It is a film. And I think that that's correct. Because guess what? I love sitcoms, but I also love films. You know what I mean?
love that.
Yeah.
That's a good
I
way
think
to
that's where I was thinking about plot in those ways. But I don't go into it saying, I'm going to do this with this book. This is just what came out of my brain at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. There are good reviews, you guys. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. There's lots of good reviews.
I just want to say that thank you for including baton twirlers. I am a former baton twirler, and I don't talk about that like ever. But I did competitive baton twirling for many years. Like I was in a baton troupe. I mean,
amazing.
When I got to college and people were like, "Oh, were you in the band?" I'm like, "I was in the band." I was like, "Oh, but I did do extracurricular." Yeah, I was the soloist in the marching band.
What was your baton
well.
troupe called?
Virginia Batnets.
Ooh, Batnets.
Yes. So out of Richmond, Virginia. So that starts it in the South, and then it goes deep South. I mean, baton twirling is like such a thing.
Yeah.
And so for you to like even get to the coaches, I mean, it's I mean, at one point I thought I wanted to be like a majorette, like on a college team, even, or a feature twirler. And then I went to the University of Virginia, and then like after I left, we had like a pep band.
Yeah.
But then they got a true marching band and baton twirler. So I was like, I missed my shining moment in life, if you will. I know. But it seems like if you've had different levels of the college experience kind of with this book, like not only were you in Arkansas, around students, you're currently a professor with students. How do you see the interaction of the students, if you will, in those settings? You said you were in, well, I would say like just being in Arkansas, it's a
college is a different experience there than in Michigan. And so as you are the observer of seeing how campus relations, because that's what the book is mostly about, their interpersonal relationships, how that plays out.
Right. It was very, I've lived in
the
now,
South.
Yeah. I've
like,
now lived in 4 college towns for like a significant amount of time. Arizona, in Tucson, Iowa City, Fayetteville, and now Ann Arbor. In Fayetteville, I was fascinated by like the aesthetics, and I felt like there was a true like subculture within the students there. I remember seeing a lot of young women walk around, and they all would be wearing like the same version of like an outfit, like the big shirt with like the muted colors and the little shorts. And then the first time I saw them, I was like, oh, there must be some event they're dressing up for. Okay. And then the second day I was like, the event is still going. They were just always all dressed in this way. And I thought that it was so fascinating that like, no matter what clothes you came in, now you're like, this is how I dress. Like, and at Iowa, it was different in that everyone was wearing the Iowa logos everywhere. It was fascinating. So I am a professor now. I like teaching. I think students are really fascinating, and seeing all of the different subcultures has been illuminating for me, especially now that I have a daughter and thinking about those things as well. With this book, there are satirical elements in tiny parts, but not with the students. This is not a pure satire, no matter what any magazine says. This was not me making fun of the South or students. I just think that that's like a lazy, boring choice. I wanted to get to the heart of who these students were from what I saw them as, which is complicated and bright and strange all at the same time. But yes, also baton twirlers. I did get to talk to a baton twirler as well, and she was fascinating. And at one point I asked her, what do you do if you drop the baton? What do you do? And she said, you make sure your coach didn't see, you squat, you never bend over, and you keep going like it never happened. And that went straight into the novel. So baton twirling is fascinating. Sparkle sports in general. I could not imagine. And when I tried to reach out to a team, the coach stepped in like, they will not talk to you, but I will talk to you. And I was like, I'm so sorry.
They have no voice.
That could be you if that one you want that. But yes. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Okay, good.
Hi. Thanks for tonight, Kylie. Yeah. Two-part question. I'm interested that you wrote the book just before, well, in the year before Such a Fun Age came out. And I'm wondering whether, had you have known that Such a Fun Age was going to be such a huge success internationally, I know it was massive in Australia. I heard you on the podcast, the book show the other night. Yeah. Would you have written it with such an American culture, sort of college-centric culture, which is something that the world knows about, but obviously doesn't connect to in the same way that an American audience would? Would you have made it perhaps more international, so to try and reach in to that international audience? Or are you kind of glad that you didn't know that Such a Fun Age was going to be such a big success, so you just wrote what you wanted to write?
The latter.
Yeah.
The latter.
Yeah.
I mean, when I wrote Such a Fun Age, I never thought that it would reach any, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that harnessing where you are with just because you are writing for you and that's it, that's where you want to be. Yeah. Not all of my books are going to be for everyone, but I also think that I personally love reading about, something that I don't know about and like diving in and seeing how it's portrayed there. I think the success with Such a Fun Age I believe it's about the book, but I also think that really strange things were happening that year. Yeah. I now know that
the
Black Lives Matter movement made it a different thing for certain people. And a lot of Black authors had to contend with like, what does it mean that white people are picking up my book as like a balm for like a huge situation that's been going on for hundreds of years. Also, people were reading more in 2020 than they like ever have been. And then the pandemic happened and it was like, we're at home, like, let's read some more. And so Come and Get It was honestly like, I felt like a freebie. Like my thesis advisor said to me, just write the book that you want to write. Like you did the big book, so this is like a freebie. So I've been that 4 years of making it was kind of like, I snuck out and my parents found out and they're like, we're going to talk about this in the morning. And I'm like, well, I'm already out, so I'm going to get fucked up. You know what I mean? Like, so just like do whatever, like this is a freebie. That's what this one was. And I'm really proud of it. So it's definitely.
Have you had any insights about whether it will or is doing well internationally, or whether it's going to have that same momentum?
Internationally, I have no clue. I'll be in London soon. So yeah, I'll find out. I hope
luck.
so. Yeah.
Well
Thank you. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Okay, take your time.
You're awesome. So I have like two completely different questions. So, like, for instance, like for the fluidity of how you write, like it's so easy to grasp. Like it very much makes me think of like Black Flamingo and like All Boys Aren't Blue and like any Matt Haig novel, but more towards like the Matt Haig-esque, like because of how fluid you write and how I can just like read it in like a day or two. Would you ever consider like doing a more memoir-esque or even like a Samantha Irby, like kind of like,
No.
Okay, well, fair enough.
I so appreciate that, first of all. And that's what I want. Like, that is what, like, the hours go to, is, like, making sure that it reads perfectly. If you are a writer in here, you have to read your work out loud. It is humiliating, but you have to do it. And just making sure that everything works out. I am so aggressively not interested in writing about myself. Maybe one day I could be.
Your child will.
My child will. Yes, unfavorably true. Yes. For the time being, no. But at the same time, I was an RA for a year. I was a transfer student. I'm a professor now. Some of those experiences make it into my work. But I just find myself being much more interested in places that I've been and like jobs that I've had. And I've had a lot of jobs. So I think that those will show up more. It's just not like my penchant. I don't know what it is. I get like cagey about it. But yeah, if that makes sense. But you had another question.
I do have another question. It's completely different.
Okay,
so like with this book, you obviously have like obvious queer characters, and then in Such a Fun Age, and this just maybe because I'm queer and I'm looking for it, but it felt like there was almost like a sexual tension between both of those characters. And I'm like, my question is like, was that deliberate in both to like have like a main queer character in this book and then also possibly have these like undertones in this book? Or like, was there a reason for that, or like any like direction towards giving that character that essence towards them? If that makes sense.
That makes sense. That makes sense. In this novel, Millie's sexuality is really wrapped up in how she views adulthood and like people who are cooler than her. And at one point she says like she's feelings towards another woman, but she feels like she can't tell her friends because it seems like it's their thing and not hers. And it's like a lot of people like are queer. It's fine. Within Such a Fun Age, there is a little bit of crossover, and I see what you're saying. This is what I think. When it comes to talking about women, I feel that a lot of women have such an intense friendship and infatuation with each other that the lines become blurred between, like, I want to be you and I want to like you to like me at the same time. I feel that the intensity of thinking about other women feels sexual, even if you don't want to like be sexual with them. I think that that's a very normal feeling that a lot of people have, where you're just like, man, I've been thinking about this woman for an hour. Am I in love with her? Like, what's going on? Maybe. Like,
well, I think also like what you're writing to was what I read was just intimacy. And I think that like, you know, when you're with your bestie and you guys are like on the couch, like watching Bachelorette and like you're cuddling, but it's like your best friend.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like those like lines,
Yes.
especially in college, where just like everyone's like one big like mosh pit of like hanging out all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I was fooling around with like what obsession looks like. And sometimes you're totally right. Alex is so obsessed with Namira that it's like the obsession feels like a crush.
Yeah.
Because that's all, like, that's the only thing you can like compare the experience to. I'm super interested in the way that women relate to each other in those ways. And I know, like, as someone like who is like, some of the best outfits I've ever had have been because a woman I hated was going to be somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel that the intensity of that emotion sometimes feels sexual. And I think that that's how people are. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, like, I get that because I feel that about Grease because I'm like AFAB and like queer and poly and all that. And I'm like, oh, I want to be Sandy and I want to be Danny, but I also want to be with Sandy and be with Danny. So, like, totally get it.
That's it. Completely. And then you throw buying stuff in there too. And you're like, there's this part where Millie goes in Agatha's cabinet and she's just looking at her salt block deodorant and her tampons. And she's like, what kind of person would I be if I use these things? Yeah, I think you get it.
All right,
Thank you very, very
you.
much. Yeah.
Any more questions before we start signing? If not, let's give a huge round of applause.
Thank you so much.